morning, everyone, and welcome back to Fusion Talks. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work I've admired for years. Priya Sarma, Head of Corporate Affairs and Sustainability at Unilever MENA. Priya, it's so good to have you here, and thank you for taking the time to be here today.
You're doing some amazing work, Yasmin. So it's absolutely my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, humble. Thank you, Priya. So now, for those who don't know the full scope of Priya's impact, she's not just any leader in the sustainability space. She's one of the driving forces behind purpose-led business in our region. She currently leads corporate affairs and sustainability at Unilever across MENA and has previously worked across Turkey, Russia, Ukraine. Named one of Campaign Magazine's top 10 marketing game changers and a Cannes Lions SDG jury member. Priya's work blends bold strategic thinking with a deeply human approach to business transformation, which I truly admire. And she also chairs the UAE Circular Packaging Association, serves on multiple industry boards, and leads the UAE chapter for the Unstereotype Alliance, consistently championing equity, circularity, and systemic change. Priya, I'm genuinely excited to dive into your journey and everything that shaped your leadership. Let's get in.
Amazing.
So, before the titles and boardrooms, who was Priya? I really want people to know you. What sparked your journey in communications and sustainability?
Amazing. So thank you for that question. I think I'll really start from the fact that, so one is, of course, my parents, we come from an armed forces background. My father was very clear. He's like, listen, marriage and all is fine, but you need to set yourself up professionally first. So that's always been a focus for me. And so when I did my MBA, one of the things I was very clear about is that I was more inclined towards storytelling versus statistics, right? So I was very clear. This was one area I was very clear about. I wanted to join an advertising agency versus getting into sales and marketing. So I then worked in advertising in India. I worked in advertising in Egypt. But I think my journey into what we call now corporate comms, corporate affairs, and sustainability, of course, started when I joined Unilever in 2008.
Yeah.
At that point of time, a lot of my focus, so I started as head of communications for Unilever in MENA. We had just set ourselves up into the MENA business unit. And so there was a lot of focus in driving internal communications. But that was also the time when in our region, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for advocacy, right? So my focus was very internal. But I think for me, the shift really happened in 2015 when we felt that there was this opportunity to set up associations, start driving more advocacy externally. And for me, the opportunity really came in 2015 when my executive vice president at that time kind of called me into his office and he said, there's a lot of work happening around, advertising in our region. We are one of the largest advertisers. He says, but what is missing in the space is a advertising and marketing self-regulatory body. And it's very important we set up that platform as this industry is kind of starting to come into its own and maturing before we start getting regulated from the outside, right? And so for me, the tipping point and my journey into external advocacy really started with the setting up of the advertising business group. And it just progressed.
So it was a proactive approach and you found your calling.
It was I always say you've got to be at the correct place at the correct time.
Yeah.
But then you've got to take that opportunity. Yeah. So again, that journey was a bit long because I had no clue what is an advertising self-regulatory body, right? So I had to do a lot of work in terms of understanding what advertising self-regulation is about. I had to talk to create a lot of connections externally with the World Federation of Advertisers, through them get connects to other self-regulatory bodies, India, Australia, Brussels, talk to those people and really figure out what is this. Yeah. So it was a journey of development for me also.
Discovery as
And
well.
discovery, absolutely. But it's definitely what sparked my passion. Yes.
Awesome. You've worn many hats, from the agency world to global corporate leadership. What one turning point that shaped your approach to leadership?
Again, I think I will come back to the setting up of the ABG, or the Advertising Business Group, right? I think that was the journey that sparked for me an understanding of the power of collaboration and partnerships and inclusive leadership. Yeah. Because like I said, it was something that we were driving proactively, right, in the region. There was no need for doing it. So driving a kind of, selling that vision for something that is not an urgent priority in anybody's books.
Across diverse mindsets.
And diverse mindsets, cultures,
maturity
across
indices in
yes,
this domain.
In this domain. And again, like you said, it wasn't just industry. It wasn't just industry ourselves. I had to go and speak to people in advertising, all the platforms like Facebook, Google, research agencies, and start selling this concept and this idea of the fact that there's a great opportunity for us to drive self-regulation in this market. And we can do it by setting up a self-regulatory body, right? So I think that was one of the first things. And my thanks really, really goes to the initial 18 founding members who put up their hands and said, this sounds amazing. Let's work collectively to set this up. And we then launched the ABG in November. Remember, I think it was 30th November 2016. Today, it's incredible. The ABG has more than about 70 members. Yeah, so definitely in the GCC, it's the only self-regulatory ad and advertising and marketing body. But the second was then, once you set it up, right, you've got to bring all these diverse people, from diverse industries together.
And to drive action.
And then, exactly, and drive, number one, a clear goal. Where do you want to go?
Direction.
Direction, and figure out what are your articles of association going to look like. So there was a lot of legal stuff behind it. And then the action, right? So for me, I think that was really that tipping and turning point.
Immersive experience that shaped you and honed your competence.
Super. And exactly like you said. And for me, it was a learning journey about myself also. Yeah.
Fabulous. So you said that the power of storytelling amused you since a young age, and you've chaired industry groups, influenced messaging at scale. What role does storytelling play in making sustainability relatable, not just reportable? And this is very key, especially in MENA, for consumers, for people at large.
100%. And one of the things, Yasmin, I always say is, and I tell people, I'm not a sustainability expert. I'm not.
Me too.
I'm not. I would think you probably more are, but in my case, I consider myself more of a storyteller, right? And that's super, super important in this field because it moves it from being a reportable metric into something that is more relatable. Yeah. Sustainability can be it helps, number one, what it helps do is humanize data.
Yes.
That's the most important thing. So data is super important to bring all of the issues that we're facing, right?
The reality, the insights, the facts.
And also showcase how you're driving progress, right? But data by itself can
be lifeless.
It's lifeless. It is, right? It doesn't engage people emotionally. How do you then, because you need everybody to put their hands up and start contributing to driving that change. And I think the second part is sustainability can be super complex, super scientific.
It is indeed.
Again, so how do you drive that engagement, that passion through storytelling? And that's becoming super, super important today.
In everything we do. If you don't share the story, which is substantiated with facts and evidence, and make it real, it will not strike a chord. And then we will not be able to act or move the needle or feel the sense of urgency.
Absolutely. And for me, I have to say, maybe I'm jumping the gun out here, but I have to say that, when I started looking at my purpose, we're very lucky because at Unilever, all of us in about between 2017, 2019, all of us had to go through these purpose workshops, right? And my question to myself was, what is my purpose really? What do I do? I just communicate. Until I really sat and thought about it. And I said, this is probably the most important thing.
Yes.
How do you spark ideas? How do you get people around the table? How do you send? And exactly, how do you learn? How do you share best practice? How do you get people around the table?
Minds.
Share, and get them to contribute. It is through the storytelling and the communication. So you're absolutely correct. I think it's such an important starting point.
And that's what connects us all as human beings.
Yes.
And again, humanizing it.
Yes.
So from your lens in media and advertising world, what makes sustainability message stick?
Great. I think, so one is, it goes back to the core of messaging, right? There are certain things you've got to look at. But in the case of sustainability, there's some extra things that come into play. One of the key things is authenticity and transparency.
Yes.
Yeah. Consumers are becoming very, very savvy today. Yeah. And they're looking out for greenwashing.
They're informed.
They're very informed.
Yeah. Media, it translates everything to your fingertips in terms of
it's all accessible, available.
Exactly.
So you can't. So one of the things is to avoid greenwashing, and greenwashing can take you down a very wrong path. Yeah. There are brands that have been boycotted because they've been seen as greenwashing.
Reputation damage.
Exactly. So to avoid that, there are a few things you must do. Whenever you're making a claim, ensure that it's substantiated by data, substantiated through certifications, substantiated through actionable actions. Yeah, so that's one very important point. And then avoid using phrases like eco-friendly. No, be very specific. Yeah, be specific in terms of reduces carbon emissions by 50%. So this is very
abstract and
and also what is eco-friendly, right?
Exactly.
These are labels that a lot of brands tend to use when they are greenwashing. So start becoming specific. Yeah, that's super, super important. The second is, and which is very important to any sort of messaging, try and storytell, drive that emotional connect to the messaging that you're driving. Yeah, because again, like we said, sustainability can become, sometimes it's such a big problem that consumers or us as members of the community, we don't know what is our role, how do we do it. So create messaging that resonates and people feel a part of it, that emotional connect.
And decode what was really the action, how it is benefiting them and the planet.
What is the issue? Exactly. How will it benefit them or how will it impact them? Yeah, if you keep it too far, yeah, people don't feel connected enough to contribute. Yeah, exactly. Then the next is ensure that across all of your platforms, your message is very consistent. Otherwise, you will lose the trust of your consumers and your community. I think the next is ensure that your messaging helps educate your consumer, because remember, at the end of the day, you need to empower them to make the correct choices. And I think the final two are visuals are becoming very important to storytelling. Very, very, very important, right? So ensure you are visually telling your story, and where possible, aim to drive immersive experiences for consumers, because otherwise they're very distant from the problem. The minute you can give them that immersive experience, they know how it's going to impact them.
They can live it and feel it.
And they can feel it, and they will want to drive, impact and solutions. And I think the final way is through two-way community engagement. Yeah, keep yourself open to feedback. That tells your consumer that you want to engage with them and you're willing to drive that continuous improvement. So I think some of these things.
Those tips. So it is specificity, storytelling, make it real, simplify, substantiate, and keep that channel of communication open. Plus, of course, it starts by educating them so that they can appreciate the synthesized version of what we've done.
At the end of the day, you want them to take action, right? Yep. Otherwise, what's the use?
Can you recall a time when storytelling shifted stakeholder perception or behavior in a meaningful way? I'm sure there are many
I,
touch points or
the
examples
example
that
that
we
I give
can.
you you'll probably end up nodding your head and saying, yes, I recognize this. So there's one brand that's done impactful work over the last, I would say, 21 years to drive a lot of impact through very strong emotional connection through its advertising. It's helped address, and
Equity.
challenge. No, it's helped challenge societal norms, which are kind of, in a way, were becoming embedded. And more importantly, drive very positive and inclusive discussions. And what is that campaign? Dove's Real Beauty campaign.
Yes, I
Okay.
love it. It's
Exactly,
a
right?
case study in its
It's a
own.
case study in itself. And, Dove started this campaign in 2004 where they wanted to redefine what does beauty really stand for. And they wanted to do it through advertising where they used real people and showcased a diverse range of women, in terms of age, body size, ethnicity. And this really sparked a global conversation, because what they did is they raised awareness of how the media is showcasing an unrelatable view of beauty, which is negatively impacting the self-esteem of young teens. Yeah.
Yes.
And then this helped. Number one, it really created, because it was so authentic, and it was something that sparked dialogue, right? At the end of the day, people started asking questions and saying yes. It really helped create a strong connect with their consumer audience for Dove, helped drive a lot of brand loyalty, and consumers who actually ended up engaging with the campaign said, yes, we will now start looking at beauty very, very differently. And additionally, it started setting a new standard for industry as to how they need to drive a more inclusive and positive reflection of how beauty should be showcased in advertising.
It is so powerful. It
Yes.
is as a vehicle, as shifting gears in a disruptive way, really looking at core thing, not the perfectionist approach.
And it's remained relevant across time. So, like I said, they started in 2004,
And
right?
consistent behind
Consistent,
it.
exactly.
Consistency again.
And I still remember, and this was probably maybe even before I joined Unilever, I remember seeing an advertising where they showcased how images are brushed up, right? So models don't really look, at the end of the day, probably look 70 or 80% of how it is finally comes
Then
out in the ads.
Photoshopped and filtered.
But then the photoshops and the filter, they actually showed behind the scene of that. And then more recently, last year, they celebrated the 20 years of the Dove Real Beauty campaign. And they made a pledge and a commitment to say that we will not be using AI in any of our advertising also. So it's really remained consistent in its messaging and very true to their purpose.
And this is authenticity embraced in branding.
Exactly.
And the brand essence.
And the brand essence,
Yes.
right? So, and if you now talk about, the brand that really stands for shifting what, or showcasing what real beauty is, there is one name that will come up in, which is only Dove. Yeah.
Which has been cultivated throughout the years. Yeah, chapeau to all the team behind it. Is there such a thing as a global sustainability strategy, or there is local nuance in everything?
So I think, Yasmin, it has to be a mix of both. And I'll give you a wider example before I come to the likes of Unilever, right? A brilliant broad framework has been the SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals. Yeah, it's been so broad and inclusive that any organization, NGO, country, there are countries which now look at that as a framework.
It's the overarching
UAE,
compass.
it's the overarching framework, right? That you look at to say, this is where I will contribute. My priorities will contribute to a sustainability focus and driving impact and change, right? But if you look at organizations like ours, Unilever, we operate in across 190 markets. You need a global ambition, vision. You need the global frameworks and objectives.
Commitments.
Exactly, to ensure that our businesses across 190 markets are focused on delivering that. Yeah. what it also helps do is that it helps translate best practices and innovations across borders without having to reinvent, which will then help you accelerate the momentum to achieving that change. Yeah. But then there isn't that one size fits all kind of an approach that you can take in local markets.
Very true.
Yeah, you have to look at, so for instance, if you end up doing a campaign, you have to change it a little bit to adapt to local nuances,
traditions,
culture, values, all of that. And in most markets, you will find that the mix between the environmental, economic, social impact of all of this is slightly different. So the global problems remain the same. Yeah, we have a problem of ocean pollutions or water pollution. You have issues related to biodiversity loss. You have climate change. So the issues are global. But when you start implementing them, you have to implement them from a local lens. And then I'm coming back to the same point of when you want to engage your community at the end of the day, you have to make it locally relevant. Yeah. So for instance, even as Unilever, we do a lot of work, for instance, on palm oil deforestation. But the problem is, yes, we all use palm oil because you use our soap, you use everything.
Yeah, has many products that we consume.
All consume, exactly. You use it in chocolates and so on and so on. But the problem is the issue really sits in the Southeast Asian countries because that's where
and they might feel it's distant.
It is very distant. How can you make
will
a difference?
Will their choice make a difference?
Their actions, how will you make that difference, right? So the global frameworks are important to ensure that we are collectively working to address things at a global level, but then you've got to do it from that local lens and drive that level of community engagement because the impact has to be delivered in the markets. And from a global organization like ours, markets have to ladder up to help contribute to that delivery.
And that's why as well, the local partnerships, local coalitions, our collective efforts, voice, like
those
what you've been doing in the Packaging Association. So
exactly.
This is vital and much needed.
Absolutely.
So what makes a coalition effective? Again, you've been chairing one. I'm proud as well to have been part of it. And what's the trap companies fall into when joining these groups? So it's important. But do you see sometimes some companies might lean more on others and claim the collective action while not being active? Yeah. So what is your advice?
So listen, coalitions are super, super important, as we've seen. Yeah, one of the first examples in our market is Coalition Circle, which is to do with packaging circularity, right? And which we then formalized into the Circular Packaging Association in 2023 under my chambers. And I was lucky to be voted in as the first chair. Just want to correct, I've just given up my chairmanship. I still sit on the board because I've done my 2 years, so I've passed on the chairmanship. But so for associations to deliver impact and be really successful, and which the CPA, starting from Coalition Circle into CPA has done is it's had a very clear vision and ambition. Yeah. And so what we have always done is, and for a coalition or an association to be successful, you've got to have strong leadership. Plus, you've got to have diverse stakeholders, but all stakeholders who are committed to that same objective.
Who truly care.
Believe in it.
They want to make the difference.
Exactly. Which is why today when we take, you remember when we started Coalition Circle, we started with 9 FMCG members with the support of the Ministry of Climate Change and then Emirates Nature WWF and GPCA.
So we have the authority, the NGOs, we have the retailers, the multinationals, local.
All involved, right?
Yes.
Today, as we've expanded, we are now up to, I think, almost 28 members now. One of the things when we have new companies coming to us and saying we'd like to be a member, the first thing we ask is, please demonstrate to us that this is a key priority for you. You have a strategy at the back end within your organization, because if that doesn't happen, you will not be focused.
We don't want a tick in a box.
Exactly, right? You don't want a lot of members and I'll come to that trap, right? A lot of companies, what they tend to do is either they tend to overcommit. So it might be a priority, but resources are limited, so they overcommit and they, overextend themselves. What ends up happening is when a association has too many such members, it loses impact because it can't do
Diluted.
anything. A association or a coalition is only as good as the strength of its members. Yeah. So one of the things you have to avoid or you have to ensure is that you're getting in members who are willing to, roll up their sleeves and actually contribute to that action. And the traps then organizations need to avoid are, again, avoid the greenwashing. Stop joining an association just for the PR value. Secondly, don't overcommit. Only join an association or a coalition if you can actually deliver value. Because it's not fair to the other active members when you're not contributing. And yes, it does happen that, for instance, I'll take another association, which is the MCPG, or the Multinational Companies Business Group. I again sit, or I'm now being voted in as a vice chair, and this is my second tenure on the board.
Mabruk.
Thank you. You've got, MCPG has also grown so much. We've got, I think, about 56 members now. And most of the members are very active, which allows us to focus on so many pillars.
Task forces you have.
Exactly. That's where companies bring in their expertise. Now, all of us can't do everything, but what we can do is continue to put up our hands and contribute, to areas where we can contribute our expertise at the end of the day. So I think those are some of the things. Coalitions will work very well when you have clear leadership, strong leadership, you have a clear vision, direction, so that everybody's going there. You have good communication, transparency. Also, the coalition or association is very flexible because things are changing so fast. We've got to be flexible. You've got to have constant communication with your members. So that's really what makes for a good association or a coalition. And the traps to avoid are avoid the greenwashing. Join only if you can afford to pull up your sleeves and actually contribute.
Put the energy, the effort, the capital resources, exactly. The human resources.
Exactly, because it's not either fair then on the association or coalition or yourself then.
Yeah, it will derail. Yes. Do you believe the circular economy can become a national growth engine, like a new form of GDP?
I'm going to say yes, a resounding yes. Yeah, it can be a real driver for growth and value creation. Yeah. But the only thing to watch out is that it tends to be a little complex to implement because there are so many stakeholders involved. Yeah. But the way it can drive growth generation and value creation is, number one of the things it works towards is driving resource efficiency. Yeah. By introducing models such as recycling, remanufacturing, repurposing,
repairing.
Exactly. All those 6 R's that we tend to talk about. And what it essentially does is it reduces waste. And when you reduce waste and maximize efficiency, you reduce cost. Yeah, that's really the business. It's a big, big business case around that. Secondly, it's going to drive, and it is already driving a high level of innovation.
Yes.
Yeah.
And job creation.
And job creation. But what the innovation does is it opens up new markets for you, new market opportunities. Then, like you said, it requires skilled working. So it's going to open up job opportunities, new sectors. And at the end of the day, it's circularity. What it's really going to drive from a environmental perspective is we are going to stop bleeding our earth and our environment of the raw materials and resources.
That extractive approach.
Yeah, that extractive approach at the end of the day. And from an organizational perspective, it really helps enhance the resilience of our supply chains. Yeah, and effectively protect us from price volatility and resource scarcity that we will end up facing.
Better quality, longevity as well of products out there.
Exactly. So the business case is very, very clear. And if you can implement circularity the way it should be, it's going to work very well from an environmental, GDP, social impact perspective. Exactly.
Absolutely. And Where is the real traction when it comes to circularity? Is it public sector, private sector, or you're seeing a fusion when it comes to
I think,
this muscle?
I think I'm going to talk about, let's say, our markets, which is the GCC and the UAE. I think we're very lucky to be in markets where the public sector is so engaged, involved, open for private sector engagement.
And ambitious.
Yeah, and ambitious, and has a sustainability ambition, right? That is probably the most important thing. So I think in our markets, I have to say it's got to be both working together. Yeah, because each brings something else to that mix. So like we've discussed, in the case of private sector, they're the ones who are going to implement, but this is where the innovations, the investments is going to come from. But without the policy interventions and the policy mandates, yeah, and things like if you look at, let's say, recycling, yeah, without the infrastructure investments that will only largely come, I would say, from the public sector, we can't implement them. So it's got to be a good mix and working of the two. And definitely that's what we're seeing out here.
And not to keep it just voluntary.
It cannot be. We've discussed, this is what we started, Coalition Circle for Packaging Recyclability, as it was a voluntary initiative. But at the end of the day, if you really want to drive the circular economy, you've got to implement what is called extended producer responsibility. And that is what is being developed as a policy.
And the Circular Packaging Association was able to influence as well
the public sector.
Exactly.
And they
at federal
support.
level, some of the
and we had, we wouldn't have been, the CPA, we did that whole study in 2019, and we did a pilot proof of concept project in Abu Dhabi, which showed that from a packaging perspective, circularity is very, very doable. And then, we had the support of the ministry to come in and say, and then, of course, and the other thing is that as a part of the study, we made a lot of recommendations, and about, I think, 12 of our recommendations were adopted. So it's been a really good mix of public and private sector working.
Great. I really hope to see this continuing, taking it to the next level. What's one thing missing to scale circularity in the region?
So I'm going to come from the perspective of, I'm going to talk about recycling or packaging.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where. And I think one of the key things we need is infrastructure development.
This is the main challenge.
This is the main challenge. We've, you get a good mix of people in the UAE. They come from many different markets, regions, from Europe, Southeast Asia. People now are getting and understanding the concept of segregation. But if you don't have the infrastructure to actually collect segregated waste, you don't have the infrastructure to be able to recycle it.
And the incentive.
Yes. It's going to end up going to landfill. So
I heard landfills are going to
close by 2027. That's, in my view, seems very, very ambitious, but hoping that'll provide a great incentive to driving momentum on this.
Yeah, especially segregation at source. Some personal reflections. So what's a moment that made you pause and feel proud beyond the headlines and KPIs?
I think for me, it's something that you mentioned. I think being invited to join Cannes Lions on the Sustainable Development Goals jury, I think it was a big moment for me. So the way I heard about it is I got a WhatsApp message through our media director at that point of somebody who was trying to contact me. And it was a very cryptic message that he forwarded to me saying, somebody's trying to contact you. And he forwarded that person's message who said, I'm trying to look for somebody in your organization. This is her name. And you know what it's about, ... And I was like, what is this? But then I replied to the person and I said, how can I help? So then they called me up and they had a conversation and they were like, we'd like to invite you to sit on the jury. So I was like,
wow.
Okay. No, I didn't go wow, by the way. Because it was 2022, right? We just finished with COVID in 2020. And And I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And then what do you want me to do? You'll send me, I'll be sitting here and you'll send me the entries and I can review them. They were like, no, 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 we'd like you to come
Wow.
to Cannes for the Cannes Lions and sit
The
on the jury.
celebrity.
Yeah, but so I remember my kids, I remember going and telling my kids that I've been invited to this, and the first thing that they said is, scam, scam, mom, it's a scam. And I was like, what? And they were like, it's a scam, you better figure out if they've really invited you. It's like, okay, maybe I should, maybe it might be a scam or whatever. But so that was an interesting one, and it was an amazing experience for me too. I met such amazing people on that jury.
Very well deserved, Priya, actually.
Yeah, it was quite amazing.
So happy for you and proud of you.
Thank you.
What's a principle or belief you hold tightly, even when system resists it?
I think be true to yourself and be true to your purpose. Yeah, that will avoid any internal conflict, and it'll keep your compass really, really focused. Irrespective of what's going on. Can't agree more. Yeah. Irrespective of what's going on around you outside. If you are very clear on your purpose and direction, you won't lose focus.
And to have this always in sync, it gives you peace, confidence, and courage to.
Absolutely. Because, and in fact, I was telling somebody yesterday, I said, society tells you need to be somebody. And a lot of times it may not gel with who you are as a person. And that ends up creating a lot of conflict in you, by the way. So it's very important to have that compass and needle and be clear on who you want to be and where you want to go, so that society will not end up defining and you don't have that internal conflict at the end of the day.
This is a wonderful advice to stick to in life, and as well to ingrain in your kids as they are ready as well to be unleashed in life. If you were mentoring the 25-year-old self today, what's the one thing you'd say about leading with purpose?
I'd say first start defining your purpose. I had no clue about the concept of purpose till I joined Unilever, right? And that's why I say I'm very, very grateful to Unilever for giving me these opportunities of learning, of devising my own internal compass, right? Figuring out what my purpose is. And the reason I'm saying it again is purpose again can be a great driver of ambition, right? It gives you clarity, it gives you energy, right? That's super important because what you think is mundane. And I told you this, when I was trying to figure out my purpose, I was like, but I only do communications, until you really look inside you and say,
the power of communication,
but the power of what impact. You do, and it changes the most mundane things into impactful things. So I wish when I was 25, I had understood what is purpose and aligned, but it's never too late. I'm happy to be where I am today.
Yes. You're driven, you're happy, you're energized. Yes. And when this is the recipe to keep going, to keep fighting, to thrive and to grow. So let's have a quick fire round. What fuels you more, progress or people?
Definitely people. I think without people, you're not going to get progress. And I always say this, you need passionate people, especially for driving sustainability. You need very, very passionate people to put their hands up. And I've seen it from my own journey. I've always said, be it on the setting up of the ABG, being on the board of the ABG, the circular packaging, especially the ABG, because with the ABG, I was able to, launch with UN Women, and launched the Unstereotype Alliance, did a lot of work on influencer transparency and things. And, we used to joke as a board because we have full-time jobs and this was almost like an evening job, but it was a job that gave you so much of purpose and opportunity to drive change that, you didn't mind doing
Again, you see, when it is purposeful, it keeps fueling you.
Exactly.
And it's unstoppable. A campaign you wish you created.
Dove. Dove has got to be Dove. Oh my God. Amazing. Yes.
Oh, that's great. I can't thank you enough for such an amazing episode, Priya. From storytelling to sustainability, the impact of campaigns, the power of data, the power of connection. You've all glued it and gelled it greatly.
My pleasure.
I'm so happy to have hosted you and keep shining in everything you do.
Thank you for the opportunity. And you guys keep doing an amazing job, because I think what you're doing is much needed. Yeah, and we've just got to get more people around the table to do this.
We'll do it together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ciao.